Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 25. Massive guest, we could say, today. We've got Adam Henson from the telly, is the easiest way to explain it. If you want to say hello there, Adam.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on. Appreciate it muchly. I'm just going to quickly pass you on to Past Wallace for a wee sort of festive thank you. Thank you very much, future Wallace, for passing me on and this opportunity to be on the R2Kast. Thank you kindly. I just wanted to throw this in quickly. Massive episode coming up in about 30 seconds. This is going to be the Christmas special, as I'm sure it'll be titled and stuff like that. Thank you so much for the support over the last year. We had 25 awesome episodes. It's been series 1, I guess you could say. Should be 26, but we started about 3 weeks into the year. So yeah, thank you very much. Already got some excellent guests lined up for next year. And as always, hope you enjoy. Yep, so thank you very much, Past Wallace. Don't want to dress like that for a full podcast. So yeah, back into normal clothes for now. Yeah, as I said earlier, thank you very much for the support of the year. It's been great, and looking forward to next year. As always, wherever you're looking for the podcast, it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and it's like 20 or 30 more now. I didn't even know half of them existed. But if you're somehow listening in one that it's not on, just get in touch with me and I will do my best to get it on there. So enough of me. On to Adam. Adam, you were brought up on a farm. You were younger. Could you tell us a bit about that and when your sort of love for farming began?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to have been born and brought up on the family farm at home. So my father was from an acting background. So his dad, my grandfather, was a famous comedian, entertained the troops during the war, worked in theatre in London, hung around with people like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, if you're old enough to remember those names. And so was a celebrity of his time. But Dad was a Londoner, but he fell in love with farming as a boy and worked on farms, milking cows by hand, working with shire horses, went to agricultural college in Cirencester, and then took on an assistant farm manager's job and then a farm manager's job locally to here. And then the Bemborough Farm tenancy, where I now live and work and where I grew up, came up on the market in 1962. So he applied for the tenancy, managed to get it, and took on the tenancy in 1962. And I was born and brought up in the house that I now live in with my wife and 2 children. So I've lived and worked here virtually all my life, quite insular, but very lovely in another way. Very fortunate to be in the beautiful rolling Cotswold Hills. You know, the old adage is there's no place like home, and that certainly rings true to me. And and my dad, encouraged me and my 3 older sisters to get out on the farm with him when we were little. And we all loved it. And we all, carried buckets of sheep nuts and water for the lambing ewes and those sorts of things from the moment we could. And I always wanted to be a farmer from the moment I can remember.
How was getting tenancies back then? I mean, they're like gold dust now. Was it as difficult, or was it a lot easier?
I don't really know, because I've never actually asked him the question, which is, it's a very good question. I think it was a lot easier. I think there were a lot of county council tenancies available and a lot of large estates. So on this estate, which was owned by Corpus Christi College, Oxford, there were 4 tenants at one time across the whole farm. As the older tenants retired and gave up their land, they tacked those tenancies on to the Bemborough Farm tenancy, the tenancy that I now have, and they sold off periphery land, sold off farm buildings and houses. And so farms became bigger and bigger with less and less tenants. And I think a lot of landlords, particularly nowadays, are taking land back in hand. There's all sorts of tax relief reasons for doing that. But yes, tenancies are very difficult to come by now. I think they were a lot easier then. Yeah,
and that had to be a good thing. What did you have on the farm then? Mainly sheep, or?
Yeah, so when Dad, and he actually took it on with an old school friend of his, and they became business partners. It was 450 acres, and it was a mixed arable beef and sheep farm. And the farm grew, as I mentioned, over the years when we took on surrounding land. And my dad had a passion for keeping breeds of livestock, breeds that he'd read about as a boy in his books that he collected. And post-war, when we were a starving nation, we moved away from some of our old-fashioned farming systems and some of our old-fashioned breeds. So Dad saw them falling by the wayside and some of them becoming extinct. So alongside their commercial livestock, the sheep and beef, he started collecting rare breeds and ended up with quite a large collection. And his business partner said, look, Joe, the reason these are rare is they're not commercially viable. They're not making any money. So what are we going to do about it? And Dad, as a boy, had always visited zoos and loved going to zoos. And so he said, well, why don't we open to the public? We'll have like a farm zoo. We'll call it a farm park. And then in 1971, they opened the first ever open farm in the country, if not in the world. So the Cotswold Farm Park was born in 1971, really to showcase and pay for his expensive hobby of keeping all these wonderful rare farm animals.
It's quite interesting to think that. I mean, a farm park is just normality now. It's a thing that's on a tourism board, and every place you go to, if tourism boards are still a thing, you know, they're everywhere. But the idea that only 50 years ago it was a surreal thing, and the first, as you're saying, in the country and potentially the world, must have been a massive jump to go for that. But what sort of, is there any rare breeds that jump out to you, be they beef or sheep, as a favourite?
Yeah, so the county breeds, those are the Gloucestershire Old Spot pigs, the Cotswold sheep, the Gloucester cattle are our three main county breeds that my dad always had an affinity for and adored, and had, you know, they were the first animals he had. And I remember them very clearly as a child growing up with them, and we still have them on the farm today. And you're right, you know, he was a trailblazer of his time, and his farming mates thought he was nuts opening his gates to the public. You know, why would you want to do that? They leave all the gates open and put a litter around the place. And in the first year, when they tried to open, the locals petitioned against the Cotswold Farm Park, and all the villagers around us said, we don't want tourists blocking up the roads. And back then, the Cotswolds was a way through to the coast. It wasn't a tourist destination like it is now. You know, every other place has got a brown sign directing you to some shape or form of tourism. And so he was a trailblazer, and he was very much about communicating to the public about food and farming. And again, back then, 50 years ago, farmers just put their grain or their animals on a lorry and it went down the road. We were heavily subsidized, and we just picked up the price for our animals at the time. And communication about food and farming and where your food comes from was hardly done. You know, people like you didn't exist. You know, it was a rare thing, which is why, you know, people have forgotten about the value of food. But yeah, going back to your original question, those are probably my three favorite breeds, although we now still have 50 different breeds of 7 different species on the farm.
I wonder if you could name all 50. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to. It's that disconnect between food and farming was huge. I mean, it wasn't even a related industry. Quite crazy. And you mentioned that some of the local farmers thought your dad was mental for jumping into it. I think that's still the case when people jump into farm parks, to be honest. But are you sure? But they always work out great. So those of you that watch, those people that watch Adam on the telly, and I am sure there is more of you that do that than watch me. I say sure, I know that's the case. We'll know a lot about what he's doing. But could you tell us, Adam, what you're sort of doing for trying to sustain rare breeds, for promoting them in the country?
Yeah, so I think certainly with the Cotswold Farm Park, our tourist enterprise, that sort of core message of rare breeds conservation, explaining where food and your food comes from, explaining about conservation and land use, is really, really important to us, you know, to our 160,000 visitors we get during the year. And for me, when I got a job on television, perhaps because of my sort of thespian background, but also because my dad had worked in the media with Johnny Morris on Animal Magic and with Angela Rippon and Phil Drabble on a program called In the Country, I'd seen Dad sort of communicating not only to our visitors, but also on screen. And that was a very kind of a natural thing for me to do as well. And although something I hadn't set out to do. And so my partner, she persuaded me to apply for a job on Countryfile. And you had to send in a video of yourself why you thought you'd be good at it. And amazingly, she videoed me skillfully and edited it very well, which is why I got chosen for auditions. And then amazingly, I got the job. And that opportunity to tell the story about farming has grown over the years. Initially on Countryfile, we were a Sunday lunchtime program getting 2 million viewers. In 2009, we moved to a prime time show in the evening, and we now regularly get 6 million viewers. and they feature much more of me on my farm rather than doing all sorts of other things around the country. It's mainly agricultural topics I focus on, and that is an amazing opportunity to talk about some of the incredible things going on in farming. As a farmer, it gets me behind the scenes into businesses that I wouldn't normally get to see. And all the farmers who might listen to this will know, as you drive around the countryside, you're looking over hedges and walls, wondering what other farmers are getting up to. Well, I get to go and find out. And also I'm getting paid as a presenter at the same time. So it's a win-win. But that communication about food and farming, you know, through Countryfile, through Springtime on the Farm on Channel 5, through Nigel and Adam's Farm Kitchen. That was a great program. And more recently, I've done a program for Channel Farm called Our Family Farm Rescue, looking at struggling farms and how they can diversify. I feel is a great honor, but sometimes a weight on my shoulders to be able to communicate about about the countryside.
Yeah, and it's you know, I think Countryfile has shown what's happening in the country, and that it's great to see everything that's happening in the country. But I also like the connect that offers viewers to almost connect with your farm and see this is real, this is what's happening. We're not just getting snippets with a camera for 20 minutes a week. Well, you are for that, but I mean, like on random places. I mean, you're constantly seeing what's happening on that farm, and that's good for the industry. It's good for the consumer to see what's happening as well. That's big viewership. It's 10% of the country. I didn't think it would have been that high. I didn't think anything saw that now on a weekly basis. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's the most watched factual program on television, which is great for those of us who live and work in the countryside to know that the nation is engaged and watching it. And it does show it's a magazine show, so it shows a whole array of topics to the public. But for me, yeah, talking about the food and farming, but also talking about some of our very valuable, gorgeous, rare breeds that I feel very passionate about and lucky enough to carry on my dad's legacy. That's a great opportunity to follow the journey of some of those animals that the public, the viewer, get to know about them and write to me and want to know more, and then come and visit them at the farm park. You know, that's really, really valuable. Yeah.
Excellent. You mentioned there, actually, one more thing I'll ask. How did Countryfile start? You said how you got in, but when did it start and how did it come about originally?
Yeah, so I think it was originally an out-and-out farming program, talking about the price of lamb and wheat and very much for the farmer about farming. And then it slowly developed into Countryfile, which was much more of a wide, far-reaching program about countryside events, places, art, poetry, whatever you like, anything going on in the countryside, which made it reach out to a far greater audience. And of course, if you're selling a television program or a magazine or a newspaper or a radio show, you want a wide audience. You want lots of people, reading or watching or listening to your show. And it achieved that very well. For the farming community, they felt a little bit robbed because they'd had their farming program taken away. But if all we did was talk about the price of lamb and, technical stuff about farming, it would be a very limited viewership watching it. So it started as a farming show and then moved on to Countryfile, which I think was probably, I can't remember how many years ago, 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah, right, okay. You heard folk talk about the farming program. Is that what it was?
I think that would have been it, yeah.
Right, okay. What does your week Countryfile wise look like then? So there's half an hour on no, that's wrong. No, that's right. An hour, half an hour.
An hour long show.
Yeah. An hour, yeah. Well, I don't know why half an hour couldn't my head there. It's an hour long show. What's your week to create that hour long show involved?
Yeah, so back at the head office in Bristol, part of the Natural History Unit, there is the Countryfile office. There's a big team of researchers down there, the executive producer, series producer, that come up with the shape of each show. And then there's a whole series of topics within it. And my section is usually about 8 minutes long. And I will film on a Monday and Tuesday, usually. So 2 days of television filming to make 8 minutes. And then every other Wednesday in the studio for a few hours doing the voiceover. And we're usually 2 or 3 weeks ahead of ourselves. So to keep it reasonably topical and seasonal, We try and, not get too far ahead of ourselves with the topics. I will sit down with the producer and discuss what's happening in agriculture. They'll have a bunch of researchers coming up with ideas. They'll look through farming magazines, the press, go on the internet, and I'll suggest lots of things to them as well. And people write in suggesting ideas. So actually, if there's any of your listeners thinking, wow, I've got something I'd really like to talk about on Countryfile, then do write in, because they won't use everything, but they're always looking for new ideas. And then, so we film it, it's edited, and out it goes. And the practicality of filming it, particularly now during COVID, we carried on filming every week. And is one self-shooting director. So it's a person who has the skill to be able to help write the scripts, set up the filming, use the camera, get all the focusing right, work with the editor to edit it, do the sound as well. So they're running the microphone on me, and if there's a contributor with me working, listening to the sound. So an incredibly demanding job for a very multi-talented, skilled person. And for me, I've got the easy bit. I'm just a gob on the stick, and I just make animals the stars, put them in front of me, and away we go. But that person, who is generally a male, usually blokes are doing it, it's very, very skillful.
Phenomenally skillful. What a diverse range of talents. And I assume if you're involved in writing the script, you're also going to have a knowledge of agriculture. Well, not necessarily agriculture, whatever's on Countryfile.
Yeah, so absolutely. So what they do is when they arrive on the farm, or I'll get sent it usually just the night before, not very far in advance. It's called a treatment, and I might be teaching my grandmother to suck eggs, but basically it's the introduction from the previous presenter. So it might be Matt Baker or Anita Rani. Now we're going to go to Adam wherever he's in the country or on his farm, and they give me a little introduction, and then there's my opening piece to camera. There's some voiceover. There's an interview with it all sort of scripted out in a framework. So you've got an idea of the storyline that we're trying to stick to. And then I'm given the free rein to change that a little bit and put it into my own words, unless there's facts and figures and people's names and places that I need to get right. But so that the person using the camera is very technologically minded, sort of, good technical skills to do the sound of the camera work and all that, but also a good storyteller and good understanding of how to get the story across. They have to have a base knowledge of the subject, but most of the technical farming information they get from me. Sometimes, well, often, they want to make it much more accessible to the wider viewer. So I might talk to you about the technicalities or using farming speak. So I might say, I'm going to move this bunch of steers up the paddock. We're going to run them down the race and into the handling system and put them in the crush. And he'll say, I don't understand what you're talking about. And so I then have to say, I'm going to move these bunch of steers, which are castrated male cattle animals. We'll put them into a handling system. We'll put them down a narrow corridor we call a race, that they'll then go into a contraption we call a cattle crush, where we can hold them still, where we can work on them. The farmer is then shouting at the screen, why is he talking to us like an idiot? But the person in the flat in Hackney, who's never been on a farm, is thinking, right, yeah, I get that. And that's what we have to do. We have to speak to a wider audience than just the farmers. And it's the skill of the director to make sure that the story is told very clearly and understandably.
That's really interesting, because when I was arranging some questions and stuff, I was quite interested if the script was you had to follow that verbatim, or if you had sort of the creative license, or whatever the word is. But yeah, I think it makes more sense that there's some change allowed. Yes, obviously statistics and stuff that's got to be followed, but that's quite interesting. Is there any standout highlights in your time? Let's just say on TV, even in general.
Yeah, there are. I've been very fortunate with the programme to have travelled all over the British Isles. West coast of Scotland is gorgeous. Loved going up there. Plug for Scotland. And it's taken me abroad, farming in Russia. Been out to New Zealand, where I travelled, post agricultural college, and caught up with some people I met out there, sort of retracked my steps. But probably one of the highlights for me was when we followed the journey of Hereford cattle. So we looked back in history of Hereford cattle, and we found descendants of the original animals that were taken out on ships to Australia. And we found relatives of those animals in the UK. We then traced them all the way to Australia and found existing animals of those descendants as well, so related to the ones in the UK. And we rounded these cattle up in these massive fields, a 20,000 acre paddock, which is like 10 farms or 20 farms over here, on horseback and then in helicopter, and brought them into the pens to do various jobs on them. And as a boy, I always wanted to be a cowboy. I always loved watching the Westerns. And it was like my childhood dream come true, rounding up Hereford cattle on horseback with, in the outback was just extraordinary.
That sounds like a proper dream come true type dream. Or not dream thing happening. How long was the process of chasing that sort of pathway in the Hereford then?
So it went on for about a month. So we did some filming within the UK, and then we went flew out to Australia, which of course is a long flight, and we were out there for about 9 days. So it was a long way to go for just 9 or 10 days being in Australia, and we travelled around a lot. There was no lying by a pool or swimming in the sea. It was full on filming. And if you talk to anybody in the media, these foreign trips, although they may seem like they're very glamorous, they're usually really hard work, and but a great treat.
Jet lagged for half of it, traveling for a quarter, filming for a quarter, and 10 minutes to have a beer.
Exactly.
I can quite imagine. So you're filming they're sort of 2 days normally for Countryfile. Is that just Countryfile? And then you're also on the Wednesday sort of doing some voiceovers, or is that some of your other commitments as well? Is it a 5-day week filming, or are you on the farm most days, or how does that sort of work?
Yeah, so the rest of the week I'm usually on the farm, either working with the team at the farm park or on the commercial farm. But then because I've been on television now for some time and worked on other programs as well occasionally. So when I'm working for Channel 5 and doing other programs, because I'm freelance, I can work forever I want. That then does mean that quite a lot of my week is filming, either for one program or another. But some of the other doors that have opened because I'm in the media is corporate work. So I work with for companies. So I'm, when the Royal Three Counties show was on, I work with them doing stuff in agricultural debates for them, going to the show. I'm Lloyds Bank farming ambassador, so I travel around the UK meeting farmers and talking about sustainability of British farming, and talking to accountants and lawyers and land agents, and so quite a lot of corporate work has come my way. So my hands are a bit soft, and I'm not out practically driving tractors and shearing sheep like I used to, but I still love all that, but I just can't be included in the team all the time because I'm just not here enough. But the media is a fickle old world, and one day they'll drop me in the bin, and when they do, I'll just go back to being a proper farmer.
I'm sure they won't randomly just get sick of you after 20 years. I can't see that happening. What you're mentioning there, that you're obviously not on the farm 24/7. How many people are you employing at the farm park?
Yeah, so I've got a fantastic business partner. So we're joint directors of Henson and Andrews. He's Duncan Andrews, I'm a Henson. So the farming tenancy, we're joint directors of that, and then joint directors of the Cotswold Farm Park. So we're 50-50 across the whole thing. And he and I, he joined me in 1987, so he's been with me a long time. He and I went to agricultural college together. He's got really good understanding of accounts and business and spreadsheets. He's a fantastic business person, which I'm not. So we complement each other's skills. And then we've surrounded ourselves with really good people. So we've got 6 on the commercial farm, so an arable manager and a livestock manager, and they've got 2 assistants each. We have someone in the office helping us as a sort of secretarial role. And then at the Cotswold Farm Park, we've got 90 staff, 13 full-time managers, and the rest are seasonal staff. So we're a large employer with a lot of people, and that takes a huge amount of management that we've learned as we've gone along. And people management is a great skill. So we use advisors and consultants to help us with that, to help sure we're running a a good team.
Well, you're looking at a team of 100. That's not something that, like, no one's an expert and everything like that. You've got to bring the right folk into that. That's amazing. Fantastic. What was the thing I was just about to ask? Yeah, I sort of jumped back to the farm park there just because I was interested in that, how many you're employing there. But on the sort of side of Countryfile, Adam, what do you think in general it does for farming? And farming, you could say, and I'm actually just about to ask you in a minute about COVID and how it's impacted your work on both sides, both farm park and media industry. Almost COVID, I don't want to say COVID's been good. That sounds like we're benefiting from something that's not nice, but it's seen prices rise, all that sort of thing. But what do you think Countryfile itself does for farming?
Yeah, so I think it gives it exposure to a very wide audience. So they've done some viewer research, and it's generally a slightly older demographic. So, plus 55-ish, maybe more into the 60s. There is a large younger audience as well. So there's a whole range of people. So people who live and work in the countryside, but also a largely urban demographic watch the program because it brings the beautiful countryside into their living room on a Sunday night. It's become a sort of staple. You watch Countryfile, then you watch the Antiques Roadshow, and then you watch a drama. And so for farming, it has made it accessible to the masses. The farming community sometimes complain that Countryfile isn't hard-hitting enough, isn't technical enough. But what they forget is that it is touching a lot of people that wouldn't otherwise have any idea what's going on in agriculture. And it isn't just about farming. It's about, the whole rural domain and conservation and farming issues. And, there's the investigates part of the program, which is quite hard-hitting about, rural issues. And so, yeah, and I think it does a very, very good job.
And all of these things come hand in hand. Just because we're not looking at someone combining wheat or lambing a yow or whatever, if you're looking at rural affairs, we are in the rural industry. All of that impacts each other, and the more we can sort of showcase that as together, that's got to be a win. I would say, and a bit of a deep, large question for you, I guess. Where do you think farming is in general, just as UK farming? Do you think we're in a good place at the minute?
I'm very excited about the future of agriculture. I think it is a very rewarding career. If you think about the agricultural food supply chain, I think it's something that our careers advisors forget about, or maybe don't even know about, because they're disconnected with the countryside and food production. And so, if you took any student and asked them what they're interested in, you could put them into that agricultural food supply chain. So it might be, shearing sheep, milking cows, driving tractors, managing a farm. It might be managing a rural estate. It might be agricultural banking, being an agricultural accountant. It could be nano engineering and marketing and food production. There's a whole array of very rewarding career choices out there in agriculture. We will always have the challenges of the exchange rate, the weather, animal and crop diseases, political change. Those things are difficult for agriculture, but we've become a very resilient industry that is quite quick to adapt and change and make the most of the situation. I think going forward, there are some initial challenges because the government is removing the base payment scheme, the farm support scheme, changing that over to environmental land management schemes that we will get paid for from public money for public goods, but they're not in place yet. So we're having support removed, but there's nothing to replace it with at the moment. We're being told we need to reduce our carbon footprint, rightly so. But there's a whole plethora of ways of measuring that. It's a bit of a sort of wild west out there, how we get our heads around that. But I think there are some interesting opportunities. So I think we can produce food really, really well with precision farming and technology and robots milking cows, self-steering tractors, drone operated machines, robotics, all is coming to the forefront. We can look after the environment and be incentivized to do that we can potentially trade carbon, and we can potentially then also look at biodiversity net gain. So where there's a building site or a HS2, we can provide the conservation areas to offset that. And so, and then also there's diversification as well. So there's a huge array of opportunities out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one thing, plugging my own stuff. If you're interested in some of the stuff Adam's just mentioned, back right at the start of the R2Kast, we had a vertical farming expert. I really want to get a person in the States who is spearheading the movement of drone spraying. There's a lot of fantastic precision agricultural techniques out there, controlled traffic farming, real-time kinesis. There's so much interesting stuff there. I'm a proper nerd for it all. And if you're interested in it, make sure to check back through of previous R2Kasts there. Adam was mentioning carbon trading, carbon credits might be what we're looking for. And you said it's tricky because we don't have a carbon calculator that we've decided is correct. We've got so many and we don't really know exactly. And yeah, obviously we want to reduce carbon, but at what cost do we reduce carbon while also increasing output? It's all quite confusing what sort of road we're going down with that. And the offsetting thing worries me slightly. Offsetting makes sense, but I think if you just have, let's just say company X has this many emissions, and they think, well, let's buy this woodland from someone else. You haven't changed anything. Your business itself is better, but is the world any better off? And it's an interesting discussion. There's much smarter people out there than me to talk about it. But yeah, it's all really an interesting future and a bit of a sort of grey area regarding payments wise. But I'm with you. I'm confident for where farming's going. A word we've only mentioned once throughout, and it's been quite nice to not hear this bloody word for the last half hour, is COVID. Now, what do you think COVID's done for just basically everything you're involved in? So the work with the TV, there, Adam, farming, obviously tourism, we know the impact there, but how has that impacted you?
Yeah, so incredibly difficult emotionally to start off with. When we first went down into lockdown in 2020, I had to send all the staff home, and I didn't know whether I'd ever see them again as employees. Maybe you might have had to make them redundant. With the Cotswold Farm Park, my business partner and I had invested heavily, so we were very exposed financially, and we were relying on that year to be our big return year. And then COVID hit, so I sent them home, and I genuinely cried a lot because I thought actually we might lose our business. And our business is a tenanted farm. We don't own anything at all apart from the sheep and the cows and the tractors. So I would, if the business had gone down, I'd have lost my entire life where I've been living all my life, and my home, because my home is a rented house where I'm sitting. I rent this place. And so it's part of the farm. And so I'd have lost my home and my business, and it was scary. But then came along a thing called furlough that I'd never heard of. I had to look it up. 5% VAT, the Cronus business interruption loan, all the things that the government put in place were a huge help. Television carried on. The BBC and Channel 5 and all those companies worked really hard to make sure we could keep working and doing it safely. So that was very good. Eventually, when we reopened the Cotswold Farm Park, the public came flooding back because we're outdoors, we're safe, we're, all the things that the government were promoting. In fact, Prince Charles came and visited the farm park a couple of weeks before we opened, and he was getting right behind rural tourism, and he came around, and that was a huge boost for us and our staff. And we changed the way we did things. So book online, cashless systems. And we then knew how many people were coming every day. It was much easier to manage. So we changed a lot of our management systems. And with the commercial farming side of things, the sheep needed lambing, the crops needed planting, but we just were really careful. So we were swabbing out vehicles, we were wearing gloves, we were hand sanitizing everything. Thankfully, none of our team got ill. We did have a few of their relations that one of them did pass away. So that was tragic. But it just changed the way we worked. And in agriculture, I was particularly worried about commodity prices and what would happen post-Brexit. and whether the COVID factor has changed that, but now the price of lamb has been really strong the whole of 2021, as has beef, and grain prices are through the roof. And so, commodity prices have been really strong. So as an individual, my lockdown was living on a beautiful farm, but I was very, very scared for the sake of our business. But now we're here still to tell the story, and have done very well this summer, and we're in a very comfortable position to be able to cope with whatever's around the corner.
Good. And commodity prices, for as long as I ever remember understanding prices in farming, I have never seen it like this, including inflation and stuff like it. It's brilliant. And you strike me as quite a conscientious guy. Having that many people on the payroll, that decision must have been horrible. Yeah, I can't imagine what that's like.
It sort of really hit me. I always was very aware of our social responsibility to all of those people that we were employing, and the success of our business is their success, because we want to, some might say corporate, but we wanted to employ really good people and train and retain them and make them part of our community and part of our family, which is very much what we've done all of my life. And a lot of them are, friends or close associates. And it was absolutely horrible, really worrying, and very upsetting. And the people talk about the mental challenges they've had during the last 18 months, and I can completely get that. Very, very difficult, and a lot of businesses haven't survived, and it's been difficult for the whole, particularly entertainment and tourism. And you think about the theatres and the cinemas and those indoor places. We were lucky we were outdoor, so we could open sooner than others.
No, I mean, I'm from an island in the west coast of Scotland called Arran. You may or may not have been. And there's basically three main industries. There's construction, agriculture, but mainly, and the biggest employer is tourism. And it ruined the island for the time. It was sad. But let's try and jump on to a bit more of a more positive topic. There's two more things I want to cover, just short things before the illustrious two questions that most of my viewers will know. It's not too over onerous, don't worry. Obviously, what I sort of do is try and promote that journey from rural to kitchen, farm to fork, stable to table, whatever you want to call it. You did something with yourself and Nigel, did a farm kitchen. Could you tell us a bit about that and how that came about? Because I thought it was excellent. I loved it.
Yeah, well, thank you. So the BBC wanted to bring together the whole idea of food and farming, and so bring together a chef and a farmer. So I would do the growing, and Nigel would do with the cooking, and we'd talk about the value of food, some of the complications and difficulties about growing things. We tried growing some crops that we don't grow in the UK, so rice. We tried growing Durham wheat for producing pasta, and then pigs and poultry and all the other things. And Nigel's a lovely, gentle person who's a brilliant chef and a wonderful communicator, and very passionate about the value of food and bringing people together to talk about what's on their dinner plates, and the Sunday roast and all those sorts of things. So it was a really enjoyable program to work alongside him, and it was very well received. It's a shame we didn't do another one, but it really struck a chord with me. The idea of trying to get across to the consumer, that is the one thing we all have in common. We all have to consume. We all eat. Getting those messages across about the amount of energy and effort that goes into producing some fantastic British produce, and getting people to think really carefully about where their food comes from and understanding the values behind it. And now I've been trying to push forward on that a lot. I've written a children's book about, it's a fun children's book, but it's about the reality of food and farming. And I've been talking to the educational minister about getting a GCSE in agriculture and land use, so that people learn about where their food comes from as children, and then as adults they can make informed choices about what they eat. And so, yeah, it was I thoroughly enjoyed making the show.
Your point about the GCSE in agriculture, I'm a lecturer in agriculture, and you get a lot of students that come in not from farming backgrounds that are like, man, I wish I had seen this, like just for a bit, just to see what a sheep does. It's quite simply that's what you're doing at GCSE. You're not going into fancy stuff. You're just looking at what farming is, what it means, why we're doing it. I would back that to the moon and back. Like, I think that is excellent. I would love to see a GCSE or like what we've got up here, national fives and stuff like that in agriculture or land use, as you say, whatever the name decides to be. It'd be brilliant. One other thing that I commend you for, I commend all of involved, yourself and Kate, were the two, Kate Humble. I remember doing this, was a lambing live. Now I have done a lambing live that went out in total to about 16,000 folk, between 3 over the course of a week, and with help with the now ex-partner, but with some family and the girl that sort of helps from down the road, and had some great fun. Folk got to see what was really happening right at the coal fire, and all times there was actually a lamb coming, which was always the worry that it wouldn't happen, or maybe the worry was it went bad. But you've done it in front of a lot more people. So how did that feel? What was that dynamic of just being live in front of the world?
Yeah. So for me, I'd never really done live television before, so it's absolutely terrifying. Kate is a master at it and a very generous, lovely person and a brilliant presenter. So she really carried me and gave me lots of guidance and help, and really took control of the situation often, because you'd block it out. So you'd go through a sort of set rehearsal. I'm going to be here, you're going to be here. We'd be linking to little video inserts. But often, as you know, with livestock, things change, and a lamb would suddenly start being born in the corner of the shed. And what they wanted to go was to the real action. And so quite often things were thrown out the window, and Kate would just reorganize everything. And so I just was a bit like a rabbit in the headlights. My only forte was that I was a farmer and I knew how to lamb sheep. And so I was comfortable in that environment. But live television is so scary, but brilliant to be able to get the subject out there. It was really well received. We did 3 lambing lives. Initially, the producers were quite worried about showing too much goo and gore and death. Okay. But Kate Humble and I were very keen that they should tell the real story of a sheep shed, of a lambing barn. And the viewer was interacting with us because it was live. People were sending in emails and wanting questions and all those sorts of things. And the producer suddenly realized actually the viewer wants to know everything. And then they started to zoom in on stuff that was happening. And we did talk about a lamb if it was stillborn. We talked about animals going for slaughter and all that kind of stuff. And it became a biological, gynecological feast. And that's and that was great, because it wasn't just lamb skipping in the daffodils, it was warts and all.
Gynecological feast, brilliant. It's great. And there's a local farmer from where I'm from that did an open lambing shed, and what that means, 100 folk on the farm coming to watch this, and him being him, and if he's listening, he knows I'm going to say this. He buggered off in the kitchen and left myself and a few other folk to be in the shed, and having that people in front of you is daunting. So yeah, fair play to you for that. Thank you very much for coming on, Adam. I've got a couple more questions to ask you there, but that's been really good to sort of get a breakdown of in some ways for a lot of people the face of farming. So that's been excellent. So thank you for that. But the 2 things I ask everyone, I haven't forgotten to ask anyone yet, is 1, where do you see yourself in 5 years? So what's the future for Adam Henson? And 2, if you had any tips for, and I'm going to make this a bit larger than normal, people coming into farming, people coming into sort of media in general, and people coming into presenting, what would they be?
Yeah, so where do I see myself in 5 years' time? Still working on the farm, developing and building our tourist enterprise. We've developed the sort of staycation side of the business. So for accommodation on the farm, that's become a really important part of what we do. So getting visitors to come and stay with us as well as visit. So the farm park's a really important part of what we do. Looking to develop the farm, I think we're going to turn towards more regenerative farming. We've got to start really thinking very carefully about our carbon footprint, and that will perhaps be turning the clock back to more rotational type of farming systems and looking closely at the environment, which I'm into and I enjoy and I'm really fascinated by. So that suits me well. And in the media world, hopefully I'll still be tickling along and working on shows like Countryfile. And I'd love to have my own countryside, slot every week on a program that was renewable every year in some kind of format. So that'd be a great thing to be able to do. For the second question, people coming into agriculture or the media or the world of presenting, I think it is about being true to yourself and playing to your strengths and working out what you want from life. What is your purpose? What is your dream? What are your ethics? In agriculture, it used to be for the people who are less academic would be advised to get into farming. I don't think that's necessarily the case now. I think you've got to be business minded. You've got to be technological. You've got to be hardworking, of course, and but you've got to be quite entrepreneurial as well. And so I would say work hard at school, get yourself off to agricultural college or university, and try and get as much experience as you possibly can on farms, practically, if that's the type of agriculture you want to get into. And the same in the media. I think there's a whole plethora of platforms now for media and communication. And, congratulations to you for doing this podcast, because I think the more we can tell the stories and get people out there listening to us, then that's a really good thing for agriculture and land use. So you don't have to be a TV presenter. You can be a journalist in many forms, whether it's writing on the radio and podcasts, influencing people in many forms. And then with that can come, financial return. So there's I don't know, it's difficult, but I think be true to yourself and go for things you really believe in and you're really passionate in. It's so important to enjoy life and make the most of what you do.
I can imagine that be true to yourself statement is very true in the media industry. And there's a lot of us want to be on the telly, just because we want to be on the telly, but not actually having a passion for why you're on the telly. I can imagine is a desire that a lot of people have. So that's a really good point. Yeah, and the way you said there that it was often less I can't even say academic, maybe I'm one of them, less academic people that would be pushed into agriculture. It's a shame that was how it was. And I like the fact you said go to agricultural college and university. That's good. All good stuff. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say, Adam. I think we've covered.
No, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. And if anybody has got any ideas, including yourself, for ideas for Countryfile or other rural programs, then we're all ears. And good luck for yourself in the future. And thank you everyone for listening. And onwards and upwards. And my one advice to everybody is take a little bit longer deciding what you buy when you go to get your food from the supermarkets or from the shops. And if you can, try and support British.
Absolutely excellent. And the next time you're in the supermarket aisles, be sure to source from the British Isles. Thank you. And this is going to be weird for you, Adam, because we're currently filming this in September. I'm going to say have a very Merry Christmas and a very good New Year. And as I said at the start, thank you very much for the support over the last year. And we will see you for Series 2 in 2022. See you later on.
Happy Christmas.